well, what I'm going to cover today is basically the new version of the Smart Feasibility Calculator, and the reason I updated it was because I found myself using more and more of this rather than the complete financial feasibility application that I discussed. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That application is 100% complete in it. And if I was to do a really massive project, I would definitely go through it. But it's just that because I do so many different feasibilities in a day on different kinds of projects, could be misuse, mixed use, could be commercial versus retail, could be apartments on the top floor, and then commercial on one floor and retail on ground floor. So that feasibility, if I have to do that, that doesn't cover all of that, all of those details, because somehow I can't capitalize the rent in that and all those things. But it is absolutely fine, and it is very detailed. In fact, if I was to do any apartment development, I would only use that feasibility because it has a lot of things that are already in there already. They already come pre-populated, and then you can go from there. Now, before I go any further, I just want to show you, because when you will get the file, it'll be it can only be installed on a Windows computer. Now, I'm a Mac, and I use Windows on my Mac using Parallels. There's an application called PARALLELS Parallels, and that application actually allows you to install Windows on it. So you need a copy of the Windows application, and you need a copy of Microsoft Excel installed on it. And you will get a file that'll look like this. It's a .msi file, which basically means it's like an installation file, and it works on every computer. So when you get it, you just put it wherever you want to put it, maybe in the downloads folder. I've just got it here on the desktop. So to install it, all I do is double click on it. I get this window and I go next, I agree, next, next, and it'll start installing. Make sure that you disable any antiviruses or anything like that. There are no viruses in this. I stand by 100%. All it is a package of Microsoft Excel packaged into a .msi installation file. So if I click on yes, no problem. And the moment I click on yes, what it does is it actually spits out the application on your desktop. So don't go looking for it. The application won't install under your program, so it won't be here. It will actually be on your desktop. And all you do is you double click on it, and a window pops up. And I've actually taken out any kind of serials or a password or any kind of serial key or anything, so that it's just easier to install and go on. So if you get this, that's the file that you will get, and I will go through how to use this file in the webinar today. So let's say you've made some changes here. Call it 345 Test Street in Test Suburb. Call it Victoria 1132, whatever. And I go File, Save As, and I select the location where I want to save it as. So for example, I can click on more options, and I say, look, just put it on the desktop for the time being, and I'll just call it test again. And this could be your the project address, whatever address you want to use. Just put that in and save it. So, and if I close this, you'll see that it's actually saved another file right next to it. So this is your main file. Anytime you want to start, it actually comes pre-populated with some data. And first I thought that I'll give you a clean file and not have anything in it, but I think it actually helps me because I always pick up something that I've already worked on, and that way it's actually just a lot easier for me, and I know where to go and what are the fields that I need to fill out. So if I was to open the test file, it opens absolutely fine. There are no hiccups with it as such, and as you can see, it saves all the changes that we had made, and that's what this is. Now it's got a few different like I've added a couple of new tabs to it, just because I felt that they are required. And it's basically building on the 3.0 that you already have. So I'm just going to go ahead and start explaining you what it does and what it is all about. Okay, now anything that's actually in blue is where you need to put your input, where it requires you to put in some value or select something. Now, your file, the one that you've got, I've actually disabled. I actually the initial one initially when I made it, I'll just open it and I'll show it to you. When you go to project timeline, you can't really change this portion, although it gives you a drop down. But if you select on it, it'll say, nah, you're not allowed to do it because I disabled it. And the reason is the initial deposit is when you haven't really signed the contract or you've given a little bit of deposit, like a holding deposit. But it is, I've made it mandatory and I've left it there because it calculates the time period from that initial deposit point. So when the file that you will get will not let you change this top time period. So now I'll explain all of these things, what these are and what everything is all about. Now, anytime we are doing a development, always remember that there's a timeline that we've got to follow. And the reason I've included this timeline into this is because we have to calculate the amount of money that we are going to put in at different stages of the project. We also have to calculate the interest on the amount of money that we are going to put in, or investors going to put in, or we're going to borrow from the bank, or we're going to use it to settle on the land, or we're going to use it for construction. So this is that is the only reason that I've added this, because I just wanted to take the pain out of calculating this. And a lot of people get it wrong. That means they make mistakes calculating the amount of money that they need and the amount of money that they will need to pay interest on. So the true development margin would calculate any kind of interest. So let's say I'm doing a development on my own, right? But I've got this other asset that I've got, and I've got a line of credit against it, or I've got an offset account against another property, and I've got 400,000 in equity in there. Now I want to use that equity to do this development. But the moment I take that equity out and start putting it in here, I've got to account the amount of interest that I'm actually paying on that offset account or on my line of credit, because that is a cost of doing this development. That is, I've got to pay something for that money. Now, if you've got money sitting in the bank and it's cash and you say, look, I'm not worried about earning any interest on it, no problem. Leave it as zero. Don't put any interest on it. But anytime you take money out, or I'll give you an example. Like in my business now, we've got a lot of investors, and some of them become partners with us in developments, and some of them just say, look, I'm happy to just give you the money, but just keep paying me 5% interest on it. So what we do is whatever money that we get at 5% or 7% or 6%, depending upon what we've got it for, I have to allow for that interest cost in my feasibility, because then I allocate X amount of funds to X project. So to be able to get the true profit margin or the true development margin for any project. So you would start with here, you would start with the property address. You can put in any address that you want. Then you put in a little bit of description, what it is all about. So it's 12 townhouses, and you put in the project start date. Now over here, the date format is the same as a normal date format, but after you press the enter key, it only picks up the month and the year. And the reason for that is for the ease of calculating the development margin and using this feasibility. Nobody does it from the exact date. Because it gets really, really complicated, and no one can actually get it right, because the way your bank will calculate the interest and where you will calculate the interest on the date that it will be calculated, or the date when the settlement will be scheduled, are going to be totally different, and those figures will keep changing. So just for the ease of use, we only go by months, and each month is actually a period. Now I'm just going to zoom in so you guys can see it. So these are your periods, and this goes up to 60 periods, which is basically 5 years. Now it starts from zero because the initial deposit, let's say I put in an offer, and I said, look, here's $1,000 holding deposit against it. So that holding deposit is actually the initial deposit, or it could be your settlement deposit, or it could be, you negotiate with somebody and say, look, I'll give you 5% deposit, and the settlement happens 120 days from date of signing the contract. So that is basically your initial deposit, and that's why it is important to have for me to freeze it, because I've got all different kinds of formulas in the hidden columns right here that are looking for that initial deposit to start calculating the number of time periods. So anytime you do a project, you gotta have a timeline. And what is a timeline is basically what you think will happen and when do you think it is going to happen. So in this scenario, I'll give you an example. This is a 12 townhouse project that I'm doing currently. I think we're going to start construction, fingers crossed, hopefully in November or end November or maybe 1st of December. We're still waiting for abolishment of services and some other stuff that I'm waiting for. But fingers crossed, we will start construction first week of December for sure. Even if for 15 days or 20 days just before everybody breaks for Christmas and New Year's. So in this scenario, we gave them $5,000 in June, and we asked for a due diligence period. So I asked for a 30-day due diligence period, which is basically one period. So it's basically every period is actually one period. But what it does is the moment you put your date in, it populates the months that are going to follow from that point on. So just it goes into June, July, August, September, and so on. And then it starts changing the year as well. So we gave a $5,500 deposit here, and we said, look, we need a due diligence period. Then we extended the due diligence period a little bit further, and then we said, okay, due diligence period is complete. Now I want to settle on this. We will do the settlement. So it was basically like 120-day settlement, but we had 30 days of due diligence in upfront. So, and just to do the due diligence, we gave a deposit and we didn't do anything. Now, if I would have pulled out during that due diligence period, I wouldn't have had to settle. I would have got my $5,500 deposit, and everybody goes home. But we decided to go ahead with it. We said, look, we've done enough due diligence and we know that the project's good. So we said, okay, we're gonna give you the rest of the money, which was an extra 50,000 or I don't know, it was 60,000 something. No, sorry, it was actually I don't know, it was 50,000 something that we had to pay in this project, and then we had to wait for a little bit more because the site had an NOD, which is a notice of decision from the council. But even after the council issues their notice, which is whatever the notice of decision is, there is a 21-day due diligence period. Not due diligence, a cooling off period. And in that cooling off period, anybody could come in and put an objection in and take us to VCAT or take us to a tribunal to get a hearing, and then you are stuck again. So in our contract, I had clearly specified that we will only settle or give you the complete deposit only when your notice of decision actually becomes a permit. So we waited for another 21 days to put in the deposit, and if somebody would have objected or for whatever reason we had to pull out of it, or the notice of decision wouldn't have converted into a full permit, we had a choice to get out of the project. So we gave a little bit of deposit initially, then we gave another deposit around that time, and then the settlement actually happened in November. Actually, it happened happened on 4th of November this month. Now we're gonna start construction in 30 days time. That's what this feasibility says, that as soon as I settle, I'm going to start construction. Now, this could change things where I'm unable to start construction over there. So, which basically means that my construction might start in January. And in that case, I'm just gonna delete that and bring it to January. But I'm gonna leave it here because I know that I will start in December. And from that point on, I allowed, so the way we count our number of periods is basically from the day we start the construction. So what it means is that I've got to count the month of December because that's when I actually started. So it doesn't take into account if I started 15th of December or if I started on 23rd of December or 2nd of December and so on. It just assumes that December was the month we started, so it counts December in. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've allowed 10 time periods to do my construction, like complete my construction. Now, council contributions are usually what the council does is they will issue you, okay, that's the amount of money you owe us for doing this development, which is it could be your council contributions are nothing but open space levy. A lot of people call them open space levy. In Queensland, they call them. They're also known. Everybody knows what council contributions are, but the thing is that you don't have to actually pay that upfront. Now, the reason I've got council contributions is because sometimes the bank will fund them and sometimes the banks will not fund them, which basically means that there could be a capital injection required by the developer at the time of council contributions. And that is why it is just on its own. So if I was to explain you what each one of these are, so it's initial deposit, and you don't have to select it, although it is there. Just make sure that it's right at the top. When you start the settlement, make sure that you don't have settlement of land before the settlement of land starts. So which basically means that you can't have it the other way around. Like you can't end the settlement without actually starting it. So just be careful because otherwise it'll mess up all the formulas on the other sheets that when we go on. You take into account the settlement period. So in my scenario, although we started in June, we actually settled in November on the land. So this is that's why I've got the time periods here, because I have to account for the money that I paid as a deposit that went into getting some drawings done, that went into getting the endorsed drawings done, that went into getting the PIC, which is the Plumbing Industry Commission number. In Victoria, we've got this thing where we apply for compliance with the Southeast Water, in our case, or Yarra Valley Water, or some other water authority, basically. So you got to have like a Plumbing Industry Commission number that basically gives you the green light on starting the plumbing works. So that could cost anywhere between $15 to $18 to $10,000 and so on. So we allowed for all of these things, and we've already done all of those things during that time before we even settled, after we went unconditional, so that we could start construction at the right time. Now, council contributions are here because they will always come a month or two before your construction is about to finish. And the reason is you don't pay them as soon as you get the invoice. You might get the invoice, I don't know, 2 months into construction or 3 months into construction, but you don't pay it immediately because you want to manage your cash flow. I mean, you could take out another 150,000 and give it to the council, but then you won't have that money to use for the next 4 or 5 months. So we actually keep it right till the end, because I only need to pay them when I'm just about to finish my construction, because I need clearance from the council to be able to get my titles. So the council won't give me clearance to get the titles unless their contributions are paid. And that is why I'm having my coffee as I'm talking along. So that is why I put my council contribution just before the construction is about to finish. Then I've got all the contracts. Maybe I've got pre-sale contracts, or I'm going to try and sell my units after I'm finished construction. So I can start selling them almost immediately after. But I'll give you an example where every time I do a project in Victoria, we go and get something known as Section 173, which is basically us undertaking with the council, saying then that, look, we are going to build exactly what you have approved in the plans. So that way I don't have to wait for the construction to finish to be able to go and get my titles. I can actually get my titles even before I finish my construction. Um, in Victoria we do that, but the project that I did in Brisbane, my lender was Westpac, and Westpac didn't allow me to apply for these titles before I got the occupancy permit. So in Brisbane, what happened was they until I got the occupancy permit and the project was handed over to us, and then we went back to Westpac and said, look, here is the occupancy permit. Here are the forms that you need us to fill out. Can you give us consent to be able to apply for the titles? And that it took another 2 weeks for Westpac to come back, and then it took a week for the land surveyor and the lawyer, and then they were actually lodged with the titles office. Title office took another 2-3 weeks, and that's when we got the title. So it took me about a month because I couldn't settle on my pre-sales because I didn't have any title. And that's why we have all these sunset clauses in there in the contracts, so that the pre-sales can't get out of the contract when the project's finished, because that's when you need them the most, and you want them to settle ASAP, because every time one sale settles, it reduces the amount of the amount that you borrow from the bank, which basically reduces the amount of interest, which basically improves your bottom line. So those are the things that you got to be careful of and make sure that you align them so that they happen one after another. So it's like basically making sure that all your ducks are lined up and do all of that. So in this scenario, I'm going to go with Section 173 and make sure that I've already got the title. So I'm going to start settling on them as soon as I finish my construction. And finishing construction basically means that you've got an occupancy permit. That means it's ready for people to move in. So that's the timeline portion of it. Again, you got to select all of them. If you miss out any of them, where it will mean that the calculations on that feasibility tab are going to go haywire. So and it's a good habit, because that way you're not leaving anything to chance. If you were to do the same thing but you had to go and get a permit, you would say, okay, I'll settle here, I'll take a longer settlement, maybe I'll take a longer settlement and I'll settle the land somewhere here. So you take this out and you take this out. So initial deposit comes in here, you start the settlement, you settle in May, and you've got the permit during that time, and then you start your construction and so on, and you can adjust your timeline that way. So those are the things that you have to be careful of, because every time period, whatever money is going out in that time period is actually going to be accounted for, and you would know at what stages, at what is your requirement of money that you need to put up front, or you need to source, or you need to put your hand in your pocket and somehow be able to come up with that money, because you would need that kind of money. So now it could be an arrangement with your investor who's going to come in, but anytime an investor is there, I prefer to have them put in everything that they have pledged to put in up front, because once the project starts, I don't want any hiccups. I don't want to be chasing anybody. You said you were going to lend me money and all that. I don't want any of that. So I usually not usually, I actually always make sure that whatever money that I need for the project is there before. So whether it comes from my pocket, or whether it comes from an investor, or whether it comes from any other source apart from the lender, this is your own equity contribution. And if you've known me, I try and do projects without putting any of my own money. And I attract all these investors to come in and either lend me money or get equity share in the project. So all that money is sitting in the bank already before we start anything. Okay, so once this is done, that's it. But make sure that you start from project timeline. So then you go to the next tab, And in the next tab, you put in the land value. So whatever value you are purchasing the land for, you put that in. Now all this is yellow because it already picks it up from whatever you entered here, so you don't have to worry about any of these. Advanced, you can't change this. Actually you can, so I'll have to lock this for you guys. But leave it at Y, and Y because I've got some complex formulas happening in here that look for that Y. So just make sure that you leave it as Y. Now I've got margin scheme here and I put that Y in red. And the reason I put that Y in red is because you need to make sure whether or not you're going to apply the margin scheme on the purchase. And I would say 95% of the second-hand property, which is basically means a block of land where no one's actually used margin scheme before, or an old house, whatever house that's already on the block, that means the margin scheme is going to apply. But I'm not an accountant, I can't give you this advice. So anytime you're about to buy something, you need to check with your accountant whether or not margin scheme applies. And another important thing, there's actually a full video on margin scheme under financial feasibility, so make sure you watch that. But I'm just telling you this because it is important and I want you to pay attention to this, because when you sign the contract, you need to make sure that the margin scheme applies is mentioned on the contract, because if it is not mentioned on the contract, you will not be able to claim it later. So when you're buying the land, make sure it is mentioned there. And when you do your off the plan contracts, make sure that it is mentioned there, because otherwise you won't be able to claim. You'll be up for the full GST amount, so that you'll have to pay. So that's why I put it in red. So if it's red, it means call your accountant, find out what you're buying, whether or not you're going to apply the margin scheme. And what margin scheme is nothing but sale, the land value less the sale minus land value divided by 11. That's how you calculate the GST in that case. So you subtract the land value from it, and whatever the other sale value is, you divide that by 11, and that's your GST liability. Otherwise your GST liability would be on the full amount, like so right now your GST liability is only on the value added portion. So you bought the land for, let's say, $2, and then you sold the land for sold the townhouse for, let's say, $3. So you're paying GST on $3. But if it's not in margin scheme, you'll be paying GST on the full $5 when you sell it, rather than just $3. So that's where you can reduce your GST liability legally, as long as it applies to the property that you are buying. Now I'll tell you where it won't apply. Any kind of commercial purchase, it won't apply. So if you're buying something that's commercial, it'll always be $100,000, let's say $100,000 of commercial property. Then you pay 10% GST on it, so it'll be 110, and then you pay stamp duty on the 110%. So that's when you are purchasing a commercial property. That's when you can't apply margin scheme to this, because the moment you settle on land, you're allowed to claim that 10,000 that you've just paid on GST. So that is why that margin scheme won't apply in that scenario. Now this section here, which is commercial leasable, it is there because I'm now looking at a lot of commercial developments. I'm also looking at mixed-use developments. So what it does is basically it tells me that, okay, I'm going to develop a retail, which is going to be 200 square meters of the floor area, but there'll be 85% efficiency. I mean, your architect could come up with another 90% efficiency. And I'll create a new video for this, and I'll replace the video in the Smart Feasibility Calculator with the new video, and I'll explain these things in more detail. And then you say, okay, I'm gonna get $500 a square meter in rent from there. So, and then you do the same thing for all the other areas as well. Put in the rent that you can get, let's say $450. And as you know that every time you're dealing with commercial, the value of the commercial property is always equal to the amount of is always the capitalized value of it from the rent that it actually pulls in. So let's say I was buying this commercial property and it was pulling in $257,000 rent, or I was developing something and I had done my research where I know that, I'll have all these three commercial floors and I'll have 200 square meters of retail. That's what I'll rent them for. So it'll give me that. And it's actually capitalized on the net rent. So what I do is I put in like a lump sum percentage, although in commercial, all these costs are actually passed on to somebody. But let's say I have an agent who manages for it, so that's the cost that I can't pass on to somebody, and I've got to go and get my own landlord's insurance. So I'll put that in, but as a thumb rule, I just put in 10%, and I said, look, I'll take off 10% from it. So that gives me the net income including GST, and then I capitalize it by 7%. And I know that if I was to sell this in the market, I can sell this property that brings me $257,000 in rent a year for $3.6 million. Now you could capitalize it for 5% and sell it for $5 million. So somebody, and if you look at the same thing from an investor's point of view, so an investor comes in and says, look, I want to buy this commercial property, it's got 5-year lease and it brings in 257,000, and I'll buy it at 5%, 5% capitalized rate, because my total investment is $5 million. I can go to the bank who will lend me, let's say $4 million, and the bank is only charging me, let's say 3% interest, but I'm making 5% on my money, so I'm still in the front. So somebody might be able to pay me $5 million for a property that brings in income of $257,000. So that's what this is. And at the bottom, if you go in, because it's a mixed use, this value automatically comes at the bottom to give you a total GRV of the project. That is if it's mixed use. If it's not, and if you're only doing a residential development, don't worry about this commercial leasable area and the outgoings. Go straight to the construction cost. And in this scenario, let's say, I've allowed 22,000 for demolition. I've allowed $1,500 a square meters, and I've got the total built area for this development is about 2,005 square meters. And I've just done it like that. You could also do it in a sense where you could say, okay, I'm gonna put $1,400 and I'm gonna develop one townhouse, and that townhouse is gonna be 168 square meters big. So that's my cost, and you can do that for all your units that you've got. So that way you know what your construction cost is. Now contingency, automatically it is already there. It says 5%. I leave it at 5% because anytime I send my feasibility to the bank, they want to see 5%. So I don't touch it. I just leave it there. This section here is grayed out. You can't really do anything to this. Now my side, this is unlocked, but you won't be able to see any formulas either. Now this is basically so you can see everything ex GST. Now everything that I put in here is including GST, and that's the way it is designed. So if you start calling up a few builders and you say, look, what's the square meter rate, what I should allow for to build a medium range townhouse with European appliances, stainless steel, 40 millimeter stone benchtop, most builders will give you a rate, ballpark about $1,500 a square meter. That's our cost. So you can put that number in the feasibility. Now this will change. I was just talking to a student from Perth, and the rate over there is about $955 for a single level house in Perth. So I was just shocked to see that, but because $955 to get that in Melbourne, I don't think it's possible. So I put in all of these things. Now, where do I get this number? Where did I get this number? Now, anytime you see something with plans and permit, they will always have a legend. And a legend is basically that'll give you the size of the area of the house, the garage, the balcony, and the private open space. So, and they are all on the architectural drawings. Now, if I've got something, if I haven't got any plans and permit, I have to just go by the size of the townhouse that I'm going to put in. So because I do this all the time, I know that, okay, if I'm going to build a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, townhouse, it'll be about 130 square meters. And if I go and start building 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, double garage townhouse, the size of the townhouse will approximately be about 168 centimeters or 18 squares or 20 squares and so on. So that's how you get this number. You get this number by basically looking at other people's plans, any site that's got plans and permit. Make sure you find where the legend is, and it is usually on 95% of the architectural drawings. You'll find that legend that actually gives you the floor space area for each unit that's actually in the plans, and that's how you total all of that, and you come up with the total space for it. So if you look at these numbers, so this is basically a sum of area, garage, and balcony, and that's how I got the 2005 square meters to, instead of actually putting in each one here because I don't have the space, I just put in 2005 as the total built area, and I know that I can more than cover it in the $1,500. Now that $1,500 would also have a builder's margin in it. So, and you've got contingency, which is 5%, and that's it. Then you come to the gross realization value, GRV, which is basically what are you going to sell these units for. Now, you see how my numbers are so 655, 295, 23. They are in that proportion because what I did was I don't try and pull numbers out of thin air. I try and back up whatever I'm doing. I do a lot of research. I'll just give you an example, and I think I'm gonna go past 8 o'clock, but I just have to. So I'll just show you something. How do I get all these numbers? That's the example that I really wanted to show you. So I was looking at a project in Cheltenham. So what I do is I pull out all this data of sales data, and then I plant this data on Google Maps. Hopefully this is the same account here. So I plant all of this data on Google Maps. I actually did this exercise yesterday, only to find out that the project that we were looking at, we were assuming wrong numbers and wrong end value of the numbers, and that's why the feasibility was showing a lot of profit. And I said, can't be right, can't be right. I just want to find out what the numbers are. So all I did was I picked up, because my property was right at the border of two suburbs, so it's Beaumaris and this is Cheltenham. So I was looking at this site. It has a permit for 11 townhouses, and see how it says 3873, because I've actually selected and to be able to get a square meter rate. Now it's sold for $915,000, but the area was 260, which gives me $1 per square meter of 3,519. So what I do is I look at everything that is sold which is comparable to what I'm doing, like townhouses or could be houses, and I try and get a sample of the square meter rate from everything close by, and then I average it based on what I'm doing, if it's a 3-bedder or a 2-bedder and so on. So if you see all these yellow highlighted portions, these are the ones which were close to my target site. So I highlight all of them, and then I pull them into one sheet, which looks like this. And I'll just quickly show that to you as well. So this is my highlighted portion. I delete all the rest of the fields. I pick them up, and then I average them, and then I come up with a number, what that number is going to be. And you will find, if you go into that much detail and you do this, when you go for your valuation, you will find that your number was so close to it, because valuers don't do anything different. They've got this like a FBI badge to show everybody that they're FBI, and woo, you gotta be scared of it. Nothing more. This is exactly what they do, and they come up with that square meter rate. So in this scenario, all I did was I put everything here, got a total, then got an estimated value. I said, look, these are my best units. and I can move my best units at 660, 670, 660, and so on. And then I got a square meter rate, and then I averaged that square meter rate, and then I basically multiplied that with my built area to be able to get a GRV. Now I could have just gone by whatever the agent had told me. Now the agents are telling me that, oh, don't worry about it, you can sell them for 720, 7 this, that. No, if I'm just blindly taking a number and putting it there, I'm actually setting myself to fail. And the reason is the agents will tell you anything. I mean, 9 out of 10 times it's the agent who's trying to sell you the project, who's telling you, oh, you can move them for 720 and so on. So I got these numbers, and if I make money on these numbers, that's how I make my decision. I never go by what the agent is saying or whatever. So I know that I've spent the time to understand what this is, what has sold in the area, and so on. So if you look at this project, for example, right, this is the same project. So I pull them in the calculation sheet, and I get my numbers again. And these are my shortlisted comparable sales that I put together, and I come up with an average. So I've got an average of 3210, 35 for 2 bedders and 3 bedders, and this is from historical sales in the area close to the street. So and this is actually a classic example, because this is what the agent gave me. He said, oh, they'll move for 680, 850, 680, and so on. And when I look at my numbers, I say, oh, it's 10% development margin, and that's pretty slim. So, but when I actually did my calculations here and I came up with these numbers, they came in even lower, which basically means it's a loss. So, and the difference was too much. So I said, there's no point negotiating or doing anything on this, because this won't work. So we decided to discard it, and I was trying to do numbers and figure out whether or not there is anything in it. So so that's how I get the GRV, and that's how you should get the GRV as well. So this is nothing telling you what the GST is going to be on the sale, and this is the total, and so on. So now we come to the feasibility. Now, so far, I don't think this is rocket science. Anything in blue is where you need to input. Anything that's in yellow, you won't be able to change it or do anything with it. So it automatically calculates everything for you. I've got a question here, but Jonathan, I'll pick up that question right at the end when I finish this, because I'm sure everybody will have a few more questions. So I'm just going to continue with this, and towards the end, I'll address all the questions. When you come to feasibility, anyone who's not a numbers person, I want you to tell yourself you can do this. And I'll tell you why, because I'm not asking you to use your brain at all. I'm just saying go with everything that's blue. Whatever is blue is where you can change stuff. Everything else is all taken care of. And the numbers that you got to keep an eye on is here, the development margin, and this section here, return on equity, equity versus GRV, equity versus TDC, NPV, and IRR. And I'll explain what they are. Even that is not a rocket science. So just the blue cells. What are the blue cells? Stamp duty. Pick up the stamp duty percentage that's applicable to your state. In Victoria, it's 5.5. It could be 4 point something, I think, in Queensland. In WA, I think it's 3 point something. So just put in that percentage, so it accounts for your stamp duty. Legals, I allow about 0.5% on my legals every time I settle, because my projects are a little bit bigger, and yeah, I do get that kind of bill. The bill for this, all of my legals, that includes settlement on land, and then off the plan contracts, and then settlement on 12 contracts. My legal bill is about $25,000 for this. So everything in yellow gets pulled in from any other details that you have already provided in the previous sheets here. Just give me 1 second. I've got a really dry throat. So that's what it is. This is basically your land value, stamp duty, Legals on acquisition. So this is your total acquisition cost. Then you've got land value townhouses. Now average construction area per unit. So what it does is whatever you put in here as the size in your construction, it pulls in what that size is going to be, like an average. So it's 167. As I said, 168. I can build a 3-bedroom, two garage, 2-bathroom townhouse really easily. So you've got estimated construction, you've got average construction per unit, which is about 265, which is about right. I've got total construction costs, and then I've got total GRV. Now everything on this section here is per unit. All these costs are per unit. So everything is for each townhouse. Everything on this side is for the entire project. See, it says total development cost here, and it says per unit cost here. Simple, very simple. You've got land, you've got construction, and these A, B, C, Q, all these things, I'll explain what they are in a second. You've got consultants. Anytime you've got a project that you haven't got plans and permit, as a ballpark figure, I allow 5% of the construction value. So if I put 5%, it'll pick it up. But this project, I actually had the plans and permits in place, or the DA in place, and that's why I only allow 2.5%, because I know that's what it'll average out to be. Even that is a little bit on the higher side, because the working drawings won't cost me about 80,000. But that's what I allow for in my feasibilities. Council contributions in Victoria is very simple. If you're building anything above 5 units, it's 5% of land value. And the land value basically is what you've actually bought the land for, not the actual council. There's a land value on your council rates notice, where the council says, okay, that's what we determine the land value to be. That's different. That is only to determine the council rates. When they calculate the private open space levy or the council contributions, they pick up the actual land value, and they cannot pick up anything that's more than your purchase value, but they can go up to the exact purchase value. Now I got caught out in one of the developments because I did 2 developments with the same council, and the previous development they picked up a lower figure, and which was equal to the one that they had on the council rates notice, and that was fine. And that's how I had done my valuation, my calculation for council contribution. But the second project I started doing, I did the same thing. I actually based my council contributions on the valuation on the rates notice. But what council did was they picked it up from the actual purchase value of the land, and I was $16,000 something off in my numbers. So now to be more cautious, and if the council picks up the lower value, it's a bonus for me. But I now allow for the higher value. So now the council contributions here are actually calculated based on the actual purchase value of what I bought the land for. Now, that's how they do it in Victoria. Let's say you're in Queensland. In Queensland, they have a different method of calculating the council contributions. And if you are in WA or NSW, the easiest way to find this out is to actually pick up the phone and call the council and say, look, I'm doing a 4 townhouse development on this block. What are my council contributions? How do you calculate the council contributions? And all the councils will, if you speak to the right people in the planning department, they will give you the formula or their method of calculating the council contributions. Now, I've already incorporated the Queensland method of council contributions right here. So it says Q over here is because if you are from Queensland, ignore this number. Now, these numbers, you'll be able to select them. Anything that's got blue text on a yellow, that means that you can override that number. If there is a different way of calculating this in Queensland, in WA or NSW, and you say, look, that's not the way they calculate it here, let me know what the way is, because in the next update or whatever, I can actually incorporate it in the sheet. But but you can do your own calculations, and override this amount. So anything that's blue, the feasibility application will actually let you override it. And GST is margin scheme. Now you can't change this Y because it actually picks it up from this sheet. So once you've entered margin scheme here, it'll automatically pick it up from there. Marketing, agents, commission, all that, 1.27. And then I've got another miscellaneous, like I allow $8,000 per unit, and that'll cover me from some legals for off the plan contracts, for settlement. I cover a bit of marketing expense. For example, this is only the commission that you will pay to the agent, but anytime you list something on realestate.com.au, they charge you a listing fee, or the price for the hoarding that goes outside the site. You have to go and get a building permit, or you have to go and get a valuation. So I know that I've allowed about 96,000 for it, and it should. My past numbers have told me that this is more than enough to allow for, and they will cover it. Now, here's what you need to do next. When you come here, make sure that you delete the finance cost. See how this is a different blue? And what this different blue is, that when you are doing your numbers, you put in this number, the finance cost, right at the end. And I'll tell you the reason why, because otherwise the sheet actually goes into a loop, because I'm trying to calculate interest on the TDC and the total costs and everything, and then it actually gets into a loop and it can't get out, and that's why I had to leave this manual. So it says I2 here, and what I2 basically means is that at the bottom there is a place where it says I2, and you got to copy that number, but you got to follow it in a sequence. You got to do I1 first. So when you start a new feasibility, make sure you delete this. Okay, so if you were in Queensland and you wanted to do council contributions, so the way they calculate it is this: how many new 3-bedrooms are you making? Okay, I'm gonna make two. I'm gonna make let's say 2 3-bedders, and maybe 4 2-bedders. So my council contributions are based on what I'm actually going to put in. Now they charge about $28,000 for every 3-bedder or more, and I think about 20,000 for every single bedder or two. But these numbers are already incorporated in here, so you don't have to worry what this is. Now the way they calculate it in Queensland is, let's say where you were developing this, it already had a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house on it. So if it has a single house on it, you just put in 1, because then they deduct that 28,000 from it and then put it there. So this is your council contribution, which is 9,000 per unit. And if you're from Queensland, you should copy this, not copy, but just put in 9,000 here, and that'll override the formula that the cell already has. Keeping in mind, this is for Victoria. Now you only need to do this if you're from another state, if you're not from Victoria. Otherwise, it just calculates. Or if you've got a number here that says 9,000, you can tweak this percentage if you don't want to delete the formula here or override it here. Make it 4.75 or something until it actually falls down to about 9,000. So it's getting closer. So I'll bring it to, let's say, 4.1 or something, so it's pretty close. So that way I've now allowed for the council contribution if I'm from Queensland. So I'll leave that as it is. So that's what this is. Now everything in pink is your total development cost. So this unit, which will average sale would be 658,000, you can now acquire for 545,000 if you develop it. So it's about 112,000. But now at the moment this number isn't correct because I haven't put in my finance cost. And one of the main reasons of this update is to be able to calculate the finance cost accurately. So this I'll leave that blank until I've done all my finance stuff. Again, when you come down here, don't worry about all these yellow stuff here. Just remember, anything that's in blue on yellow can be overwritten. Anything that's in blue, that's where you need to put some stuff in. You need to put some sort of an input in. Now, let's look at the finance calculation, the way this is working. This is saying stage one, developer's equity seed capital or pre-land settlement. So you want to get into something, and if you are developers, you won't be buying land and settling on it and then start paying interest on it and then think about doing a development. That's not how developers work. Always get a long settlement, always get your due diligence, always get a time as much as you can push. The more time that you can get, the more cost you can save, or in terms of finance, in terms of anything that you need. Now, when I do something like this, like in this scenario, I paid a 10% deposit because that's what I was supposed to pay, and that basically meant that I would need $264,000. Now, if I would have pulled this $264,000 from my line of credit or somewhere where I was paying interest on it, I would put that interest here to be able to calculate the true value or the true profit of this project. But in this scenario, I had another investor where the money came from, and we are not paying any interest to that investor. So I've left it zero. So let's say any money that I was to put in at this stage, it came in at 5%. So the moment I put in 5%, then it calculates another 188,000. What's that? So it's A plus B plus C. So I go back here. A is the legal acquisition cost that I would need. B is the consultants, because the moment I get on my land, I wanna order my working drawings. I wanna order any kind of reports that I would need to get to the next stage. So I can't buy something and start sitting on it. So I've got to get all these things into motion. And C is basically the miscellaneous legals and whatever that I would need. So all that money will come in at 5%. If there is a finance setup cost, so say for example, you got a private lender who said, okay, you do it, I'll give you 5%, but let's do an agreement. And there's a legal cost for you guys to do a loan agreement between the two of you. So you will put some finance setup costs. Usually, if it's private money, there won't be any finance setup costs as such, but there is a provision there if you wanted to do that. Now, what is finance periods or holding costs for the full duration? Any money as a developer, because this is developer's equity or seed capital, that comes in, you can only get it back when the project is complete. And when does the project complete? So it starts in period 0. So it starts here, and it actually completes in the 19th period. Now, it always starts with 0 and finishes one after, because 0 is also a period. So that's why it finishes here, but it calculates it correctly over here that my duration is 19. For whatever reason you want to change that, I've left this field unlocked. So you can override it if you want to calculate it. Now all this interest is calculated monthly. For ease of use is not by dates, as I explained earlier when we started. So make sure that it is 19th, or I mean, it automatically picks it up. You don't really need to change it. Now, this is asking me whether the interest is going to be capitalized. Basically, capitalization means that you won't be paying it in a monthly installment. So anytime we've got private lending that comes in, it is always capitalized, because we tell our lenders up front, our investors up front, that look, it'll come in, but I can't pay you in installments because that hinders my cash flow. So you'll get your money after the project's complete, and that'll be the percentage, and you'll get everything up front. So I leave it as yes, it will be capitalized. That means you're not paying any monthly installments. If it is not capitalized, you just put an N over here, and it'll start calculating the interest. Now it's not calculating anything because I've changed the interest to 0 over here. So I just leave it at Y. And this basically tells you that that's the money that you need to have in your pocket to start the project. This is the seed money that you need, and all it covers is now. Don't get bogged down by this number. This number is big because my development is $8 million. The GRV is about 8 million plus or close to 8 million, and it's a 264,000 was just the 10% deposit on the land. So that's why this number is big. If you're doing a smaller development, that number would be smaller. So it'll give you that number that, okay, that's the money I need to get started. Then there will come a time when you will settle on the land. That means a bank needs to be involved. Now the bank's gonna say, okay, now this, they actually pick up this number. Now this is just the land settlement. Now at some point I've got to settle on the land. You could have a deal with the bank where the bank, you already got your pre-sales, you got a really good favorable settlement, and then you just go to the bank and the bank just gives you the full construction loan. And in that scenario, you'll just skip this step completely because you just started construction, there are no installments, nothing. But if there is any period where you have to settle on land and the construction won't start for another 2 months, 3 months, 4 months down the track, that's the time you use this box, because that's where the bank is coming in, and the bank's going to lend you, let's say 70% LVR, 6.3% interest, and the loan amount, it automatically calculates it. The finance setup costs are going to be, I'll put in 0.78%. You could change it to 1.2% if you wanted to. But that's how it's calculated. And at the time of land settlement, what else do I need? I need $145,000 to pay the stamp duty. That's another money that I would need at that stage. Now, this money could come in at 5%. If the bank is funding it, it comes in at 6.3%. So I can take that off because this money is coming in from myself, the investors, and so on. So we're not charging anything to the project. So I've left it at 0, and I know that, you know, that's the money that I would need. So and what this is doing is, again, this whole column is about per unit. So whatever the interest that I'm getting here is being calculated for per unit. Don't worry about this. What have I done? Just give me 1 second. I don't know, what did I do? I don't know, I've done something. Ah, okay, sorry. It was 0.78 and I changed it to 78%, and I'm thinking it's saying something's gone wrong here. So yeah, my apology. That was 0.78%. So now I know that for 2 months, if I settle on the land and the construction doesn't start for another 2 months, I will have to pay $2,818 per unit for the 2 months. So the total interest is here, and don't worry, this has been checked and rechecked to be able to get this figure correct. So this figure is correct. Now, this interest is not capitalized, which basically means that I'll have to have the money to pay the installments. And that's why it says N here, which means no, that it's not capitalized. That means I must have this money in my pocket. And what this does is it does a total of all the things that I would need, the stamp duty, the shortfall, any other money that I would need. It calculates it here, the interest or the setup cost for the loan and so on. So it'll pick up that, you know, I need another 707 here. Let's go to stage 2 of developer's equity contribution. Stage 2 is that at the time of land settlement, I need $707,000, and that will cover all these other costs that I've just totaled here. So that 707 will again come at a cost. Now you can pull your money out of your line of credit, offset account, bank, wherever. But if you pull your money out of your account, if there is an interest cost associated with it, you can put in that interest over here. If there's a finance setup cost associated with it, you can put that in as well. But if it's not, leave it as 0, and then it will calculate the interest based on the amount of time that money will be used for. Now it's coming in the 5th month or the 5th period. That means that money again will come out right at the end of the project. I can't pull it out in the middle of the project. So, and again, that interest is going to be capitalized. So there's no interest payment that I have to worry about here, but I have to come up with that kind of money. So these are my costs. This is before the construction starts. So far I need about 1.1 to do the project. Now I go to the bank to say, okay, give me my construction loan. And they say, okay, I'll give you your LVR is good. Now they can lend you based on two things. I don't know. Just give me 1 second. Your LVR could be based on TDC, which is the total development cost. So if you go to the top 4 banks, any NAB, Westpac, Commonwealth, ANZ, they will only lend you based on the total development cost. But if you went to a third-tier lender or a private lender, they might charge you higher interest, but they can lend it to you on GRV, which is basically, they could say, look, we'll give you 66% of the total GRV of the project, which is 7.9 million. They'll give you 66% of that money, which basically means that you'll have to put in less of your own money. But because in this scenario, I went to NAB, they would only give me 66% of TDC at 6.3. So that's what they'll give me. Now, this is the second thing. When you get to this point, you need to delete this field. And I'll tell you why. Because that's the maximum that they will give me against this project. 66% of TDC. TDC is 655. And when I come down here, that's the maximum that they'll give me. But they've already given me 1.848 to settle on the land. So, and they look at the contingency and say, look, we're not even going to release the contingency to you, but we have to account for it and deduct it from the maximum amount that we can borrow you, so that towards the end of the project, if we need to have that contingency to be used in a project, we still have it with us. We haven't released it to you. So we deduct that from the total amount. And what's available for me for construction is 2337. And they will deduct one more thing, which is the capitalized interest, because once the construction starts, you don't pay monthly installments. So the interest gets capitalized. So what they do is they say, okay, we'll give you 4.3 mil, but we'll take the land facility out, whatever we've already given you for land. We'll take out the contingency, and whatever your interest requirement is, we won't release that to you either. So we'll keep that interest with us so that we are covered. That's how the top 4 banks, they cover their backside like 10 times. And that's when they lend you the money. But having said that, they are the cheapest and the easiest to deal with as compared to the third-tier lenders. They are difficult to deal with. You move an inch and they'll cut your arm off. You got to be careful with the third-tier lenders. But make sure that what you get. I've dealt with all kinds of sharks. Luckily, there's one shark that I'm getting rid of on the 7th of November. There's a settlement happening for one of my other projects, and that shark will be off our back. It's 10.2% interest, and anytime we pay them money to reduce the loan, they actually charge us $2,500 to accept that money. Which is which is strange, but we deal with it. So what is this? This is a funding table that every bank will ask you to provide. What is that funding table? Funding table is nothing but a distribution of equity or cash or whatever that the bank is funding and that you've got to fund from your own pocket. So what they will look at is at everything. So over here, everything is all ready. Just the blue ones that you got to look at depending upon what you've selected here. Now, and when we go to the GRV example, I'll show it to you. Just make sure that at the bottom it says tally. Tally basically means that it tallies it out. Whatever they are releasing to you and whatever you are contributing is all equal. So as long as that's equal, that means your numbers are correct. If you change something here, for example, I select the bank, you'll see that I'll get an error. And I'll explain you what it is in a second, because when you do GRV, you'll always have an error, and I'll explain you why. So let's look at each one of these. You've got land acquisition cost, developers equity 950, and bank funding is about 1848, because that's the maximum they'll give you against the land. Land finance cost, which is basically your setup cost and whatever at that facility, that's that, and that'll be funded by you. Construction X GST and X contingency would be that, and they will only give you that much because they already have taken out all these, they have already deducted all of this thing. So that means you have to come up with 416 of your own money to do the construction, or you get them like like a 80% pre-sales or something like that. Then you've got contingency that the bank's going to keep, and the bank's not going to release it to you, so that goes towards bank's funding. Then you've got consultants that you would have already spent, so it goes under your category. Then you've got council contributions, that's 132, and the bank's not going to fund it, the bank's going to force you to fund it because you have gone to a major top 4 bank. Now, if this was GRV, let's say change it to GRV, this will always be error. But in that scenario, you can push this amount to the bank funding because there's still a surplus left here. And that's why it shows an error. That means that based on 66% against the GRV of the project, the bank can lend you a lot more money than as opposed to the TDC section. And that way, bank has a surplus 346 that you can ask for, the bank can lend you based on your requirements. But it is best not to borrow this because you only want to borrow what you want to use and you don't have any requirement of this money. So that's why it shows an error here. But because it's TDC based on total development cost, this council contributions will be funded by the developer. Then there are GST costs, which are not funded by the bank. Most of the banks won't fund it. They will give you another facility for GST and say, look, claim your GST and then put it back. Then claim your GST, then put it back in the GST accounts. It's like an overdraft account they give you for $75,000 sometimes. I've got a $75,000 overdraft on this project, and also I had this same amount for another project in Brisbane. So what it is that you pay the builder and you claim the GST from ATO and you put it back in there. You pay the builder, pay the GST, and park it back in the overdraft account. Now you've got marketing and agents commission. I've left it as 0. What this 0 is basically, sometimes I've found that if I'm doing apartments and everything, I have to go to a project marketer. And all project marketers these days will force you to say, okay, we'll get you the signed contract, we'll get you the 10% deposit and an unconditional contract, but you got to release 50% of your marketing commission that's owed to us upfront the moment we get you the unconditional signed contract. So if that's the scenario, that means you need to have 50% of your commission ready in your hand to be able to give to the project marketers. So in that scenario, I would allow for $50,000 more that I need to have in my pocket because it's a major project. Now I've allowed for it, but I don't think at this stage anyone's doing a lot of apartment projects, or any of my students who want to do apartment projects. But if they were doing it, there's a provision there for you to allow for that cash that you might have to have in your pocket. Then you've got capitalized interest with the bank. The bank's not going to give you, the developer's not, don't worry about this. This is just blank. There's no capitalized interest at this stage because it always stays with the bank. I'll tell you how this number is going to get populated in a second. Then you've got miscellaneous plus legals plus marketing. The developer needs to pay for it, and that's 96. So basically, at the time of construction, I need to have this money and the council contributions in my pocket to be able to do construction. Now let's go to stage 3. And this is again the lender finance. This is construction will start, and this will go right till all the contracts, the off the plan contracts, or all your sales contract that what you've sold have settled. So that's the capitalized interest calculated based on all of that for 13 periods, because they get capitalized only after the construction would start. So if you go back here, till from this point to this point, you're actually paying all this interest, or the monthly installments. But the moment that starts, your interest actually gets capitalized. You'll be amazed how much thought I've actually put into this to be able to make sure that I haven't left anything. So that money is actually calculated from construction start to contract settle, because that's when the bank actually gets their money back. And that's 13 periods. Now this is the land facility, which is, let's say, 70%, and it actually automatically picks it up the moment you put it in here. So if it's in yellow and it's on blue, that means there's a formula there, but you can override it. At 6.3%, you've got interest cost per unit, and then you've got available for construction, which is 233. Now this is all these calculations actually based on an S curve, which is basically at 60% consumption. What that actually means is that, let's say you need $2 million to construct, but you're not going to draw $2 million on day one. So it'll be based on the stage. Okay, you've got to reach the base stage, you can draw another 200,000. You reach the lockup, you can draw another 400,000, and so on. So what this does is it calculates the interest costs based on a drawdown amount. Now it does all that here in the background, so don't worry about it, what it's doing, but that's how it is done. Then if the bank's actually given you a GST facility, like an overdraft facility for 75,000, there'll always be a different interest rate for it. And in my scenario, in this project, it's 9.1%, but it's an overdraft facility. If I don't draw anything, I don't pay any interest on it. So again, I have actually, and what happens is, let's say I've got to pay 200,000 to the builder for stage 1 for base stage. So my GST in 200,000 would be close to about 18, 19,000. So what I do is I pay, let's say, 180 to the builder from my main loan account, and then I pull $20,000 from this overdraft facility, give it to the builder, and then claim it in my next month's BAS. So every time you're doing a development, you have to file your BAS monthly. But check with your accountant, because I'm not an accountant, not supposed to tell you this, but check with your accountant. I always do it monthly basis, so it helps me with my cash flow. So whatever 20,000 that I've just paid to the builder, I can claim it straight back within the next month. So the moment that money comes back, I actually park it back into my overdraft, so I'm not paying any interest on that money. So that's why over here, this is based at 60% utilization at any given time, but it goes on for that 13-month period. So that's what that interest cost per unit is going to be. This is for the project is going to be. And then I've got total interest costs and so on. Now, I had 6.3% here. And the reason I've had 6.3% here, but if you actually look at the offer and the paperwork that I signed with the bank, they've got different rates. They've got like a 4.5% this rate, and then 1% on this, and then $5,000 monthly fee, and this and that and that. No bank will ever give you like a flat rate. What you need to do is calculate all those costs and convert that to a percentage so that it's easier for you to calculate it. Now, even if I allow 20 different boxes here, so you can calculate the monthly fee or the account keeping fee or the overdraft fee or this fee or that fee, it just gets very complicated, and it'll be different with every lender. So what I do is, for simplicity, is that I calculate all those costs, the interest and everything, and the time period, and I say, okay, my effective rate is actually going to be 6.3%. if I'm paying all this $5,000 monthly, and then whatever I'm paying monthly and so on, all the fees and everything, the effective rate for borrowing this money is actually going to be 6.3%. So that's how I get to that 6.3%. Now, this is developer equity stage number 3, which is your construction finance. This is stage 3, and you needed another 548,000 here. So if that money is again coming at an interest, you can put that money here, and it'll automatically calculate the interest on that amount for those 13 periods and put it here. Now, I haven't got anything here, so I'll just leave it as it is. Now, see, we left this box here, and that's called I1, which stands for interest 1. That's the box you need to fill out first, and make sure that this is empty and delete it. So you come down here and you pick this number up, 226878. Scroll back up. So I've actually linked the cell here, and it's a little bit gray. I don't know if you can see it, but when you open it on your computer, you'll be able to see it. Just copy this number here, which is 226878.69. So that's my capitalized interest that the bank is actually going to keep with themselves. They're not going to release it to me. They'll keep it so that, you know, they've got the interest before they've got the principal back. So after I put in that I1, my calculation over here is going to change, which is the cost per unit. Now that I2 needs to go right up over here. Again, I've linked the cell so you can just copy it rather than scrolling up and down. So you go 20948.54, and that tells me that my project has 16.24% development margin in it, and it's $92,000 per unit. That's my margin, and that's what I will make. Now this target DM, if you've used the previous one, is basically, you know, if you want to make 25%, you put in 25%, and then it'll tell you that, you know, you should buy the land for 2.2 mil rather than 2.64. That's what that is. So this is when you're doing some numbers before you've had an offer. So that's what this is basically the residual value of the land. So okay, let me just finish right at the end. So what's this here? Now this is telling me that this is the total of all the money that I have to have at different stages to be able to do this development. But hang on one second. I've been claiming GST on all my expenses. So what I do is I use that GST that I claim back as cash flow. So less input tax credits, which is 315,000, and my gross GST liability will be 478,000. Where did I get this from? I got this from here, from my GRV, 478. That's the plain GST without any things. But the net GST liability is only 163. What does that mean? That means I owe that much, but I'm going to claim back that much. So that is my effective GST. That is why over here, when you look at your GST and the margin scheme, that'll be equal to that amount. And that's how I know that my calculation is correct, because this is using a different formula to do this. And the ones that I've used at the bottom are different formulas. So when I'm calculating my development margin, I only put in the GST that'll cost me more than what I can claim. So that is why you can't put $20,000 or $40,000 in GST over here as it shows here, because I've been claiming back on all the expenses that I'm making, whether it's to consultants, to construction, on anything. So I'm claiming all that back along the way. So that is what the difference is, which basically means that I can add or subtract that 315,000 that I will claim back through the project from the money that I have to come up with, because I don't have to come up with the 315 that I can claim back from the taxation office. So I deduct that and I get a final figure that I need 1.45 mil, 1.453 mil to be able to do this project and carry it all the way through. So what is this? This is return on equity, which basically tells me that I put in 1.4 mil and I make 1.1 mil. I'm getting 75.97% return on my money. What's equity versus GRV? That means against the GRV of the project, I need at least 18.39% of the money to be able to do this development. I always calculate that because anytime I see a project and I know the GRV, I can go bang, 20% of that, that's the money that I need to do the project. Now, no matter how many courses you do, no matter how much you pay to other people, they will not tell you this because they want you to sign for, I don't know, some other stuff or whatever. They will not tell you this. My mentor never told me any of this. Of actually, none of this actually. This is all through doing different projects and making sure that I've got it right, I've got it right every time. Now, I'll have to stop this webinar here and continue in the next one to explain all the other shades. And in the meantime, I will record a video and upload it, and whoever's got beyond the first 30 days of their course will get these applications and everything that they can install and start using and watching the video. But I'll pick this up from the next time on because I'm not being fair to my son who's you know, everyone's waiting for me to go out for dinner. So we've got equity versus TDC. I'll just complete this portion and I'll pick up with NPV and IRR from the next one, although I had everything ready that I wanted to explain you regarding discounted cash flow, net present value, discount rate, internal rate of return. I actually really did want to explain it to you, but I knew that it was going to take me a while. But I'm going to get to NPV and IRR in the next one. So I've got equity versus TDC, which is basically if you've got the total development cost, you need about 22% of the total development cost to be able to do the project. So this is so I can have a thumb rule. So you can reverse this as well. People who are good with maths can easily reverse this. And what is the reverse? Let's say I've got 200,000 in my pocket. What is the biggest project that I can do with 200,000? I would say divide 200,000 by 0.25. Now you can divide it by 0.2 as well, but I usually allow for 20% to 25% of equity in my hand to do any project off the GRV. So if you've got 200,000 divided by 0.25, and whatever that number is the size of the project that you can do with 200,000. Now what happens if two people with 200,000 each join hands together? They can do a $2 million project. What if three people come in? You know, every 200,000 will actually give you another mil. So what's that? 200 divided by 0.25. It's that gives you about 800,000. Sorry, not a mil. About 800,000. I was thinking it was 20%. If it's only 20%, then every 200,000 will get you a project that's $1 million. So 4 people join in, you can do a $4 million project together. So that's how it works. And I'll have to explain this to next time because this will take a while for me to explain. There are certain concepts behind it. And in the next class, in the next webinar, I'll explain the project related site value as well. Okay, so let's get going. What I wanted to explain to you was after we've done the full analysis, I mean, we went there, we put in the name of the project, we put in some description, we put a start date. So say for example, we were starting in June, we were building 12. I explained last time that this is going to be blocked and it'll always be the initial deposit. And we select the dates and the times when we start our settlement and when the settlement ends. So it could be, usually when we do developments, it's basically we try and get some time between the time we actually give the deposit and we actually do the settlement. So that's what that's about. So if you haven't watched this, I won't go over the whole thing again. But if you haven't watched it, it's actually already uploaded in the webinar section. And I have also uploaded that in the Smart Feasibility Calculator version 5.0 as well. So I think this is all I have already explained all of this. So let's go back here. So return on equity is basically the return that you actually got on your money, and this actually takes into account the leverage that you get by borrowing money from the bank. So if you look at the total amount of money that went into the project from my pocket is 1.453, and the money that came out from the project is 1.1 mil. So I had to put in 1.4 to make 1.1, which is about 75.97% return on the money. Equity versus equity versus GRV and equity versus TDC. There's no actual need for calculating this. It has no effect on the amount of profit or whatever you're making on the project. The only reason I do that is so that next time I look at my bank balance and say, look, I've got 400,000, and I quickly want to understand the maximum deal or the size of the deal that I can undertake. I now have a pretty good idea that anytime I do a project, and if I've got whatever amount of money I've got, or let's say the total GRV of the project is 20 mil, I just have to multiply that by 0.25 because I need at least 25% of that money in my hand to be able to do the project. And I can do it in reverse as well, where I'll just go here and I'll put something. So let's say I've got 350,000, and now I know that I need between 20 to 25%, or it could actually be, if you get a good valuation, it could be between 18 to 22%, and so on. So I need about that much in order to do any project of the GRV. So if I look at the bank balance and say, look, I've only got $350,000 left, so all I have to do is divide 350,000 by 0.25, which is 25%, or let's say 0.2. Whoops, two dots. Okay, sorry. And then I know that the size, the maximum project that I can undertake shouldn't have a GRV greater than 1.75 mil. Now there is no other course out there that actually teaches you this, and this is just by experience that I've put it together, because at every project that I did, I figured out, what's my equity versus the total GRV, or equity versus the total development cost. And I figured this out that, ballpark figure, that's the kind of money I need in order to do this project. So anytime a project comes on my table, and the thing is now that I don't really wait, I don't really look at a project thinking what have I got in the bank, because I've understood that if I've got a good project, I'll have a lot of people who will want to do that with me. So we look at a project and we say, look, whether or not can we pull this off. So I'll give you an example. We wanted to, our lease came up for the office that we use. It's actually not an office, it's a warehouse, and it's a factory kind of place, because we use it for construction, and it's got all sorts of things sitting in there. Everything left over, the tools, site toilet, anything that's left over from the construction site actually gets stored in there. But we have a partition, and on one side we've got 3 offices, and I sit there with my 2 partners. And so our lease came up, and we wanted to move out, go to a better place which had better exposure, and all that. And then I said, look, I'm not going to rent another place and move there. So we are developers, so we want to find a project that we can develop which is also commercial or mixed use or something where we can put something, we could save something. So, and what happens is I get all these people who come in, and we started looking at these projects, and the first project that we look at is about 4.5 mil, just to buy the land, and we're just trying to make the numbers work, whether or not it works. And then my other partner looks at his calculator and says, look, as per the amount that we've got sitting in the bank and what we can service, we can only buy a block that's 700,000. But we don't really look at what I've got in the bank, I always look at, can I make this work? And if this works, can I put it together? And that's exactly what I want all my students to think when they look at a project. They shouldn't look at it based on the size of their bank. They should look at it whether or not it's got money in it, whether or not it's got meat in it, and whether or not it's got enough in it that if you package the whole project together, would you be able to sell it? Would you be able to attract other investors with you to be able to do the project? Because all of us, when I started, I only had enough money to do one project. And I put that money in the project. It took the project 3 years to turn over. It was an apartment block, and believe it or not, it actually just finished. In fact, I still have the retention amount, 50% of the retention amount with me. And I started this project early 2013, and it's finished now. And during the same time, I finished 5 other projects, which were Chana's projects, because we could turn them over a lot quicker. So the whole idea is, when you look at a project, I don't want you to think that whether or not you've got this money. I want you to think, can you get any favorable terms in terms of settlements, in terms of deposit? Can you stall the project? Can you get a longer settlement? And during that time, does the project actually show some really good numbers in it? Is there anything that we can do to pull it in or to make it work? Because if you manage to do that, and if you manage to control that project some way, shape, or form, and I don't mean just by controlling the project by getting an option, because when the market is hot and the market's going up, it is very hard to get options on smaller blocks. And when I say smaller, I'm talking about even 2,000 square meter blocks. It's very hard to get an option on those size, because these size are snapped up really fast, and if you go any smaller, they are snapped up even faster. So anyone who's selling these systems where they say, oh, no money required, you just go and get an option, you got to ask yourself, if you own a 700 square meter block, or a 800 square meter block, or 1,000 square meter block, and somebody asks you to give you an option on it, which basically means that they've locked in the price, and it's up to them whether or not they would want to settle on it after 12 months, and you are stuck. You can't move or do anything with it. So it's always better. I actually go for getting some sort of a time to get my due diligence right, and once I know that the project works, I have made sure that there's nothing wrong with the site, there's nothing wrong with overlays or overland flow or flooding or bushfire area or whatever. Once I've made sure that I've ticked all my boxes and everything is good, we go on conditional on a longer settlement. And anytime you talk to somebody, you got to talk it in this way. Look, I've never bought a property in an auction, so don't worry about it. If it goes into auction, you can just walk away from it. There's no point. I've never bought a property in auction. I would never want to buy a development site in an auction ever, because you don't know where you'll end up, but you can go there. I've been to many auctions. I stand there, we say nothing, we do nothing, and we see how far it can go. And so far, for the last few years, because the market's been so hot, the option keeps going up, and we say, look, we can't make it work at that price. Maybe someone more often than not, a builder can actually make it work, because the builder's actually got a margin on the build side and also on the construction side. So in something like this, I would have at least 10% margin on the construction side as well. And the reason is that you need that kind of margin, because you hit a snag somewhere, like in my Brisbane project, I hit a snag somewhere with the stormwater. It cost me $42,000 to get it fixed. It came out of my pocket. So I need to make sure that if I hit something like that, like an unforeseen expense, I can weather it. So what I was trying to get to you was that don't limit yourself with the size of projects that you'll be looking at. You'll find that there's a lot more competition in smaller sites. especially battle X blocks where you're thinking of subdividing the front one or keeping the house at the back and selling the one. It just gets, it's really like the starting level of investment, and you don't really need to go there because you decide where you want to start. So if you start right at the bottom, it's going to take you that much longer to come back up. My first development was this 9 apartment site, which is the GRV of the project is 4.05 mil that I got into, and I had never done a townhouse development. I had not even bought any other property or done a renovation or done anything. I mean, I had bought my house, and even that was a vendor finance deal with my landlord, and he used to come over to mow my lawn and all that. So I made friends with him. We became good friends. I used to ask him to help me out every now and then, and he used to get something from me. He was retired. We became friends, and I asked him to sell his house to me, and I was actually renting it off me. I rented it off him for 2 years, and even at the time, I didn't have any money to be able to go to the bank and say, "Look, can you lend me some money?" And that's how I got the house. So that was the only property that I had. So I had decided very early that there was no way. Although I went to all these seminars that in 2012 were sending everybody to Murumba and Karratha and Gladstone, so that people go cash flow positive and this and that. I figured it out very early that there was no way that I was going to put a granny flat and then add another room and then rent it for X amount and this and that. It's the same amount of effort no matter where you go. So you decide where you want to start. You want to start right at the bottom, it'll take you that much longer to come back up. But if you start somewhere in the middle, or if you start somewhere higher up, it'll take you a shorter amount of time to go even higher up. And there's nothing that, don't ever think that you can't do this because you haven't done this. If you look around you, we live in a world that was built by people who were no better than us, and that's what's actually always driven me, and that's what actually I feel. I look at all these people, and sometimes I actually doubt myself. But I'm fortunate enough to be working with two very good people, and my business partner, who's a builder. His name's Sam. And eventually next year, I think we will organize something where all my students get to see my office and come to a seminar or do something where we can catch up and get to know each other. And he's been a builder for over 30 years. He's built for a lot of developers. He's very experienced in construction, and every time I say, "Look, we're going for this deal. It's too big. It's too that," and he would tell me, "Don't worry about it. They are no better than us." He keeps telling me that the people that he works with now, which is myself and our third partner, we've got more talent amongst all three of us than the big developers that he's already worked with for so many years. There's a very big construction company here in Melbourne called Shangri-La Construction. He used to work for them. Then he started working for IQ Constructions and so on. So he's got a lot of experience, and he's been around for a very long time. So if somebody is in the construction industry in Melbourne, he actually knows them. He actually knows them by name and face and all those things. And he keeps telling me that don't underestimate yourself, because I see you, and I work with him, and he gives me all that confidence. So I'm trying to give you guys the same kind of confidence, that don't underestimate yourself. Go out and get it. And if you get stuck somewhere, give me a call, send me an email. I'll help you put it together. And that's the whole point. If you've come to do this course with me, it's not, yes, there is some content that you got to go through and everything, but you've also got to go and take action. So don't look at the sides. If you master running numbers on sites and reading out some basic due diligence stuff like the slope or or if there, whether or not there's a tree, or whether or not the site's contaminated, or whether or not there's height restriction or the setback, or all these things. They're very minor things, and I'm not an expert at all of this, but I've only learned it over the years, and looking at different sites, and saying what's wrong with this, and what can we do with this, or what can't we do with this, and spending money along the way with architects or town planners, and getting a report back only to find out that that doesn't work because it's got this kind of issue or that kind of issue. So and you'll learn the same way, but I want you to look at least 5 to 10 sites every week and run numbers on it. Just run numbers on it and keep running numbers on it. And as you keep going all these sites, and you've gone over 10 sites every week, and in a month you've gone over 40 sites, and you'll see that a pattern will start emerging from every time you look at a site and what you can put on it. And very soon, I kid you not, 2 months, give yourself 2 months. And if you're looking at 5 to 7 sites a week, I'm not even saying 10, that's one site a day. Okay, take 2 days off on your weekend, do nothing on that day, but 5 days, look at 5 different sites with plans or without plans. Try and do some numbers, try and find out what the rate is. Think of it as a homework, or think of it as a maths exercise that like my kids go to Kumon and they get these math sheets that my daughter's got to fill in. Think of it like that, and you'll see that in 2 months' time you will know these numbers like the back of your hand. So when a project actually does present itself to you, you'll be able to pick on it and say, look, okay, that's what's missing, and that's what's not working, and yeah, this one works, and I can move on it. And whether or not you can move on it doesn't matter, because then you get into the other strategy where, can you stall this guy? Can you get a due diligence period? Can you sign something and pay $1,000 subject to due diligence deposit? And all those things will start coming in. So if you've got something that's very good location, ticks all the boxes as per what I teach in all of that, and you've run numbers on it and it's correct, you should be able to put it together. And if you've got something, bring it to me. I'm not saying that I want to move on it or jump on it or do anything with it, but I'll help you put it together. And if that means that I send an email to my database saying that, you look, one of my students doing a project and he's looking for other investors, I've checked the deal myself, I think the deal works, these are the things that I think we need to check further. Is there anybody else who will want to do a deal with them? Exchange phone numbers, talk to each other, and do a project. But if you keep just sitting and thinking that the market is down or this is that, there's a ton of negative media outside, a ton. And also don't limit yourself to just residential development. Look at another side. I mean, those mixed-use sites where you've got a retail store at the bottom and you've got permits to put 4 apartments at the top, or you've got a layer of office and you've got another layer of residential on top of it. They are becoming very popular because they are smaller entry points. Plus, if you sell all your apartments, you still get the shop underneath that you can put on lease, and it'll still be positive cash flow. So don't limit yourself with anything at all. But anyway, let's move on with this. Now, what's NPV and what's IRR? Okay, so let's go and have a look what NPV is. NPV is nothing but it's basically the net present value. And what does that mean? Have you heard of the concept that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow? Because $1 today can be put in the bank, that'll give you some interest. So it's supposed to be bigger in size or monetary value than the dollar that you've got tomorrow, because by tomorrow you would have had 1 day's interest added to it. And that's what net present value is. So what they do is, it's basically an investment measure that lets you guys can see my screen, right? I'm going to make it even bigger so you guys can read it as well. So basically it quantifies the adjustment to the initial investment needed to achieve the target yield. So if you look at what the target yield is, the target yield is this. You can put in 15% and 50%, whatever you want to put into this. but I'll tell you how it works. So let's say you've got 500,000, and this percentage is the return that you want to make on your 500,000. But you just can't say I want to make 50% on my money. It doesn't work like that. What you got to say is that if you got 500,000 and you were to put that money in the bank or invest it into, I don't know, mutual funds or some kind of fund, or in the share market, or any other opportunity apart from this project, let's say. So you compare and say, look, if I park my 500,000 in the bank's gonna give me nothing. Bank's gonna give me what, 2% maybe, or 1.75%, or maybe 2.13%, or something like that. So what's your opportunity cost of that 500,000 if it sits in the bank? You can either make 2% on it, or you could make a bigger return on it. So let's say your opportunity cost of making that money is 10% something, or let's say is 20%, or let's make it 15%. That you're going to make that money 15%. So NPV is nothing. What it is trying to do is it is trying to see how much money is actually going into this project at various stages. Now, this, you don't have the same copy that I'm trying to show this to you, but I just wanted to show you some of the cells that are hidden here that are calculating the NPV, and what it is telling me that on November 16th I'll have that much money coming out of my pocket, and then in December I'll have 372, and in January 21, and so on. So all this is coming out. And then from October 2017, I start my settlements, and I start my, so the settlements actually span 3 months. So that's exactly what it does. It actually just spans it over and spreads the payment across to 3 months. So where did we get all these things? So initially, when I asked you to put in when did your settlement start and how much money did come in and what the money that you needed to start construction, that NPV calculation is happening from those columns. So what it is trying to do is trying to figure out your money injection at every stage, when the land is settling, the construction starting, the council contributions are going out of your pocket, and then when is the money coming back to you? It comes back to you starting October 17, and we say that within 3 months we'll have that. So we can't actually say the 650,000 townhouse will settle on that day and on that day on that way. So it has to be just taken in a ballpark figure where the entire money that actually comes in at the end of the project gets spread across 3 different periods. And that's how this NPV payments are actually collected. So if you want to, I'll give you another example. The discount rate for a project will be specific to each investor, and that's exactly what that 10 and 15% is. And for an individual investor, this is typically their desired rate of return. So it's in other words, you can look at it as your desired rate of return. That's the kind of money you want to make, or you basically say, this is the opportunity cost. I'm only making 2% there. I'm happy to make 10% here, and you put in that percentage there. So I usually leave it at about 20, because when banks do their valuations, NPV comes back at 20%. So I leave it at 20%, although there is no other opportunity cost to make 20% elsewhere with the money. So I don't know why all the valuers put in 20%. So I just leave it at 20% or 22% and so on. Sorry, I'm just having a sip of my coffee as I talk, and then this is what the discount rate also includes accounting for the perceived riskiness of the project compared to alternative investment opportunity. So that riskiness, what that riskiness is, and I'll show you in a second in the next sheet. But let's say, so this is another example trying to explain what it is. So let's say you have $1 million to invest, and you've identified 5 potential projects where you can invest your capital, and completing a discounted cash flow for each of these real estate projects will enable you to make a decision regarding which asset to acquire. So you can do that as compared to a bank, or you can also do that and you can look at 5 different projects and say, oh, which one's making me enough money at 22%, which has the highest IRR, which is the internal rate of return, which is the next one, and I'll explain you what it is as well. So what this is doing is completing a discounted cash flow analysis for each of these real estate projects will basically help you take that decision. So comparing the internal rates of return for each project will tell you which asset will provide the highest return. Alternatively, give your desired rate of return. The net present value will tell you which asset provides the highest value stream of cash flows. So NPV basically tells you the cash flows, and IRR tells you the highest return possible. Now everything that's actually in orange is already in the financial feasibility module, where I explain different metrics, and that's what this is all about. So internal rate of return, I've explained all of that. I don't want to open this again because this is already in your module. So this is telling you that's the return. So let me just give you an example. So let's look at this, and this is a 4 townhouse development, and in this 4 townhouse development, I'm putting in 247, and I'm still making about 85% internal rate of return. And whereas over here, I'm putting in 1.4 mil, and I'm still making internal rate of return. Now, they're more or less the same. Why? Because internal rate of return is actually based on the time of the project, the length, the time periods in the project. And in both these projects, the time and the return that I'm getting is more or less the same. So when you start looking at this, so this is giving me about 15.1%, and this project is actually giving me about 16.24%. So that's why they're coming out to be same, and it's going to take me the same amount of time to settle, do the construction. And you'll find that as you do look at similar kind of project, it'll be the same, and you're getting the same kind of return. However, if you did a bigger project, there's more money in the bank as compared to a smaller project, and that's the difference. So over here you make 1.1 because of course it requires more money to come in, to go in as well. But I'd rather make 1.1 if I can have, if I can make sure that I've got 1.1. So yeah, that's what the IRR and NPV is. The reason I put them here, usually they become more, they basically become more, they are required more, basically, if the length of the project goes over 24 months. Because if you got into a project now and it's a 5-year project, it's going to take you 2 years to get the DA, and then it's going to take you another year to get it off the ground. That's when you want to make sure that you take into account the NPV and the IRR calculation, because it's going to take a long time, because you want to make sure that your money is working for you the most. But then again, if something takes 5 years, but your development margin here is about 35% or something, and then this also goes up, but then the risk also goes up, and all those things start changing. So those are the things that you can tweak and play. Now these two calculations are also available in the full-scale financial feasibility application that you've already got. So if you want, I just wanted to include them here as well, because usually when I send it to the banks and everything, I look at this, and at some stages we haven't even done the full-scale feasibility on something. Like in this example, I haven't done a full-scale feasibility at all, because I'm confident with the numbers that we've got, and what we put in and what we've allowed, and I know that at ballpark that's where it will be. And even the construction, because I do my own construction, so I know what my construction square meter rate is. In fact, this is a little bit higher, on the higher side, but we left it in there so that it covered any kind of contingency if there was an issue that we forgot about something. So Yeah, and you don't have to worry about construction as much, because here's one thing I've learned about construction: everything is fixable. So no matter what goes wrong, it can be fixed, unless somebody gets hurt. That can't be fixed. But make sure that nobody gets hurt. But if you're not the builder and you give it to somebody else, then it's their problem to get their occupational health and safety sorted out. I know that we stress over it a lot. There's so much compliance with it. We got to have all these induction reports. We got to report any kind of small incident. Somebody cut their finger, even if it's like a little cut. We got to report it. All those things. So, but anyway. So now let's move on to the next tab, which is the project related site value. And the only reason I actually included that in here, because if you were to send this feasibility to your bank, they would not bank, but they would a valuer, and a valuer would inevitably put this thing together. And this is the same format as Charter Keck Kramer, and I've actually adopted that format from them. And the reason I did that is because I paid 2.64 for this site, right? But when they do an assessment on the site based on the permit or based on the DA that the site holds, this project related site value could come out higher or lower. If this comes out too low, which basically would mean that I'll have to inject in more cash. And if you go through the valuation module, I talk about this, because the sooner this project related site value comes in lower, the bank will reduce the amount of money that they would be willing to lend to you, which basically means that you just paid too much for the land. But we didn't pay too much for the land. That's the market rate. In fact, I bought the second site that's in planning at the moment a little bit higher from that rate, and this site already had the permit. That site didn't have the permit. So I paid almost the same amount for a site that didn't have the permit, and then I got this site. I had already got this site which had the permit, and I paid exactly the same for land, although I should have paid less for the other one. But that's where the market is going. That's where it's hot, but we could still make it work. There's still 400,000 in it, and you could easily do the project. So what this is nothing. You don't really need to do anything on this page except for this field here. And this is that riskiness that I was talking about over here in the discount rate. So what this is, that they look at the site and say, you haven't got any pre-sale contracts for this site. So that means the risk is higher. And what I have seen from experience out of different valuations that we've had with CharterCAG, and I was having this same discussion with the bank. I actually spent 3 days to put this sheet together, and the reason is I couldn't come up with this 18%, because the valuer actually put in 22%, which reduced my project related site value, and the bank and I had an argument over the actual site value, because the bank said, I'm not going to lend you that kind of money. So the bank reduced what they were going to lend to us, and that's why what we need to put in went a little bit overboard. I was expecting to pay 1.6 based on my quick 0.25%, 25% of GRV calculation. But when that happened, bank said you gotta put in that much, but that was on a higher side. But anyway, I was mentally prepared that we would need to come up with 1.6 to do this project. So this is the basic. All these time periods are actually pulled in automatically, and they are pulled in from what we do over here when we put in our project timeline. And when we go here, is basically GRV less GST inclusive. So what this is doing, you won't be able to select it, but what it does, it basically starts picking up all these values and start deducting the GST, and then the land value, and then the basis for GST, and the GST on sales remittance, and then GST exclusive value. So what it's trying to do is trying to get to a residual value of land by slowly deducting off the land and the GST, and so just to be able to get to the net land value somehow. And they start doing that from the GRV and start deducting all of that to be able to get to the actual land content. And then they deduct other costs like selling costs, agents commission, GST, and they deduct a percentage based on the risk in the project. And that's the percentage that's variable, where you can put in 15 or you could put in 50. The higher the number that you're going to put in here, the lower the site value is going to fall, and that will depend upon the risk. So if, for example, this feasibility was for a project which was like a 40 apartment site, and the risk was high, and you get a valuation and you've got no pre-sale, nothing, the valuer is going to say the risk is pretty high in this, because the bank's not covered. So the bank's going to say the risk is high, we're not going to lend you that kind of money, we can only lend you a very small portion of it. The rest, if you want to do this project, you got to come up with that money yourself. So, but generally it's between 15 to 20%. Now, this valuer gave me 22%, and I spent 3 days trying to figure out how did he come to the 22%. And I exchanged so many emails with the bank and with the valuer, trying to figure out. I said, give me a formula how you got to 22%, and he had no formula. And I kept thinking that it was somehow related to the percentage here. But he had basically pulled it out of thin air, saying, you've got no pre-sale, that's why I'm going to use 22. And the bank had already done a similar valuation on a site in the same area, and over there the entrepreneurial margin for profit and risk was 15%. So if I put 15% here, you'll see that my site value actually goes over the value that I have paid to buy the land. So that's what it would depend, and you would have to look at it and do a guesswork and pull a figure out of thin air between 12 to 25% based on the riskiness of your project, and put a percentage here, because that percentage will then get deducted from the land value to be able to arrive at the project related site value. I hope I'm not confusing you. And then they go on to deduct development costs, purchase holding costs, and finance costs. If you have filled out this sheet and the first 3 sheets properly, on this sheet all you have to do is play with this percentage, and you'll be able to get the project related site value. So that's how it works. All these other fields, other tabs are basically exactly the same as the version 3.0 that you had before. And it's actually more for a report purpose, where if I was to put it together in a report, so number of years 2016, and they jump in 5, 10, and 15, like 5-year intervals. And all it's telling me is that total development cost, whatever the cost goes in, and this is per townhouse. So this is, I'm actually expanding this a little bit more so that you could do some calculations based on, if you were to hold this, what would it look like for you? And if you were to sell it, of course, if you sell it, then you, if you own one of the units here, you just made 92,000 by selling it, and you pay the capital gains tax or whatever tax on the 92,000. But if you were to hold it on a longer period of time, I actually met up with my accountant and I said, look, I can't do any tax related calculations properly, and neither do I want to wreck my brain into learning all the tax brackets and doing all these calculations. Why don't you give me a sheet? So he's already got a sheet, and he's going to give me a sheet where you just put in what you make in a year. And so basically version 6.0 is already under making, and when it's ready I'll release it. So what it'll do is that if you were to keep one of the units here, you just put in that I make, let's say, $80,000 a year or $150,000 a year, and it'll just tell you what it will look like for you in terms of tax, in terms of all the things that you could claim on it, and the rental income and all those things. So what this tells me is that when you as a developer do this, you actually acquire everything at cost, or you actually make 75% return on your money, or you get it 16.24% cheaper than the market value. And now this market value is very conservative in this scenario. This property actually went on the market today to get our pre-sales and everything, and I might be able to show you the listing. Nope, give me 1 second. Where is the listing? There. Here, that's this, and we are selling it from 670,000. And if you look at my feasibility and you come back here, scroll down, sorry, that's the 4 towers developed. I'm thinking what happened here. I've got 675, some of them are 622, so my average here is about 658, and we've actually put them on the market from 670 plus. So yeah, you would have seen this before. I need to get 5 pre-sales, then I can start construction. I think we've already got 5. There's another partner in this project. He's got 4 friends. I think he's going to organize the 4 pre-sales from them. And not both actually, all 3 of us plan to keep 1 unit here. So we've only got practically 5 left to actually sell. So, and you put in the capital growth rate on that area, and you can, I think in one of my other videos, I show you where to get this rate from. And all it does, it basically, you put in the rental yield, the rent increase per week, or what kind of rent increase do you want to do annually. And I usually put it at the same as the CPI. And what kind of rent can you enjoy from it. I think in this area it's about 450 or more for a 3-bedder, and less outgoings. I mean, I've only got a percentage. You could break it down even further: insurance, property management, any kind of maintenance. But something like this wouldn't require much maintenance, but it may. Like I have a unit in Brisbane, brand new unit, just finished. It's got ant infestation somewhere, so I'm getting a pest control done on it. So all these things, and this then gives you a growth chart of that's what your portfolio will look like. So if you were to just get rid of this portion here, you'll see that everything will just fall down, because that means that you've actually just acquired everything at the retail price. So this is your development margin. That's the rental income in 5-year brackets. So each 1, 2, 3, 4 is actually 0, 5 years, another 5, another 5. So 1, 2, 3, about 15-year difference. And 15 years later, your capital growth and your rental income, you would have enjoyed about 240,000 in rental income. And 15 years from now, that property could be quite a bit actually. Actually, I haven't looked at it, what's going to look like in 20 years. A mil. That's alright, that's pretty good. So, yeah. And this is the project summary chart, which is something new. I actually changed it a little bit, because if you put all of these together and quickly, and you put in your text and you explain what the project is, put in some more executive summary of how you plan to acquire it, maybe long settlement, or this, that, whatever you want to put in, or whatever you were trying to structure it, or put in an offer, or structure an offer in a different way, or whatever your arrangement is with this. This is basically for you, so you can attract investors. So the address and everything just comes in here. Everything in yellow you don't need to touch. Everything in blue is what you need to put in. So let's say 4 people want to come together and do this project, and there are 100 units available, and it's going to be a unit trust. Now this is saying number of units required. Now usually that'll be the same as the number of units available, but this is trying to tell you how you can structure a no money down deal. So if you say number of unit requires, let's say 80, that basically means that 1.4 mil that you need to put in, you're actually raising that money by selling 80 units instead of 100 units. And you are keeping 20 units in your pocket. Are you with me? Make sense? I think it would. So what we're trying to do here is let's say I've got a lot of investors and I haven't got any money, but I found this deal. I'm gonna execute it. It looks really, really good to everybody. The returns are good. The project has a shorter timeline. Everything is great. But what I want to do is not put any money in. So I could say, look, I want to spend only 90 units and raise all the money that I need to do the project. And in that process, as my fee, I'm going to keep 10 units. That means I won't be able to charge a monthly fee on this thing because I'm getting equity. You'll be very, very super duper lucky if you got both. My no money down deal, I got 20% equity, which was good. But I worked for free, which was fine because the equity was good enough. So what this is doing is basically telling me that I can sell each unit for 16,151. So now what's your entry point in this? Can you find somebody who's got 16,151? Can you find 90 of such people? Actually, you can't, because a unit trust always has a limit of 20 people maximum. So anytime you start getting more and more people, I would recommend that you don't get too many people, because then you are one person who's managing and executing the project, and then you've got these 90 other people with $15,000 each who are trying to tell you what to do. So you don't want to do that. You want to go and talk to 4 people, and if they don't have the full amount on their own, they can go and find 4 more people and put those 4 people in chunks of 4 unit trust, and get those 4 unit trusts to come and buy 25 units each in your unit trust or something. So what I'm saying is that you make sure that when you're trying to put something like that together, just try and minimize the number of people that you will have to talk to or report to. Basically, if you got that many people that you want to talk and report to, it's just gonna get messy. They will start telling you what to do, and they will start saying, I want a white color wall, I want a black color tab, and all that. You don't want none of this. This is pure business, pure numbers. There's no emotion, zero. And you make every decision based on numbers. So that's it. You just put in 20. It gives you the per unit price. You press the command P, and instead of active sheet, make sure you select the entire workbook. What I usually do is I put it as a PDF, and it just puts, so if I just go on the desktop, create a new folder, let's call it 123, and just save it. So on my desktop, that's what it looks like. So it'll package everything into one, and I'll have a summary. The only thing is, pick up the summary and put it right at the top. So scroll up and move your PDF, that page, so that it sits right at the top, because that's what they want to see when they, you can do that after you print it as well. So I hope you know what I mean. So I'm just trying to put that summary right at the top. And it's getting a little bit fidgety. So when you present the report to somebody, it looks like this. So they will look at what the report is. I'll say, they'll read the description, what it is. You talk about here, and then it talks about the timeline. Then it talks about how you've done some numbers and the assumptions you've made. And then it talks about this. It also talks about the funding table that the bank would want to look at. You could even send this to the bank, but I wouldn't recommend sending the front page to the bank. You can send the bank page 2, 3, 4, 5 up till here. So about from, so if I show it to you in the Excel sheet, from number 0 to first 4 can go to the bank. First 4 tabs can go to the bank. Everything else is for you and the investors, if you want to put something together. Now what this is basically a my way of calculating. I think I've covered that in another webinar before, how I come up with a square meter rate to be able to come up with the end value, because your valuer would inevitably do exactly the same thing. I mean, they've got other methods of calculating the residual value of land and everything, but what I'm trying to explain is they'll do exactly 9 out of 10 times they would have done the same exercise to come up with a square meter rate in the area based on the past sales or some recent sales, and some comparables where 3-bed, 2-bath, okay, double garage, similar kind of finish, stainless steel appliances, stone bench top, and they look at those things and say, that sold for, that was 165 square meter, it sold for 660, square meter rate is that. If I average the expensive one and the lower ones, it'll be that, and then they extrapolate that based on your development to come up with a price. And I came up with that price a very long time ago, and in fact the valuer actually came up with a better price. So I didn't change it. If it works at that lower price, the project would be a lot better at a higher price. Now that target DM works exactly the same way. So if you want to make 20% on something and you put in all your numbers, if you put 20% here, it'll tell you that you should be paying 2.450. If you want to make 25%, it'll tell you that don't pay more than 2.2 mil. So yeah, it's 16.24. So it tells me 2.6 mil, 2.64. This is what I paid. So it's very close. You won't be able to get it very accurate, because what it is essentially doing is actually deducting all the costs from the land and then trying to get to this end value. So it will never be exact same, but it'll be very close. So that's what the financial feasibility application is all about. So if anyone's got any questions, we've got a few minutes before we finish for tonight. Okay, can you explain, if I have 300k in equity, how big the project I can invest in? Okay, I'll just go back here. So let's say you've got 300k, but that you're saying that you've got it in equity. So is that correct? If I ask you, is that in a line of credit or in an offset account that you can pull out? Yes, okay, sorry. So maximum, this is the maximum part. So maximum that you would need is 25% of GRV. This is what I've tried to explain in here. So in this scenario, I only need about 18.39% of the total GRV of the project. But I say, to be double sure and still have a cushion for you, just in case anything goes wrong, all you do is 300,000, divide that by 25%, or 0.25 straight. So this is exactly the same. Divide that by 0.25, it's the same. So it's 1.2. 1.2 is the biggest, is the maximum that you would be able to handle off your own bat. That'll be the GRV of your project. So if you're operating in an area where it's the townhouses are $600,000 each, and you come across a duplex site where there's just 2 townhouses, it will be that. So you'll be able to do a 2. But what I'm trying to say to you is this: let's say you've got 3 of such people who've got 300,000. Let's say times that by 3, and then you still got that 25% thing. So divide that by 25%. You can now do a $3.6 million project. and the return on that $3.6 million project, I guarantee you, would be a lot more than the 2 townhouse project. There are people who are attending this webinar today who've got individually, they might think to themselves that, yeah, I haven't got enough money. But if you post that in your in the group and say, look, I've got, don't post how much money you've got in there. Just say that, look, I'm looking at this 4 townhouse or 6 townhouse project. Anybody wants to join me? The total GRV of the project would be X amount, and I'm looking for 4 such people. I'm telling you, only the people who are attending this webinar would know what you guys are talking about, because they can go back home and divide that by 0.25 and see, oh, I've got 200,000, you need 800, so we need 3 more people like that. It's like the secret PDS language that you guys can use on the group and talk about it, and other people won't know what you're talking about. So that's what this is all about. Any other questions from anybody else? Okay, are the construction costs on the spreadsheet pretty accurate? Jonathan, actually, construction costs depend upon what you're trying to build and where you're trying to build, and they'll be very different. I have a student who's actually attending the webinar. I was having a chat with him yesterday, and the construction costs in Sydney are about 2,200 square meter for townhouses, which was, it just blew my mind, because that's a bit too much. It's like in Melbourne, if you spend 2,200 on something like that, I don't know, have full glass windows from the floor to the second floor, to the first floor or something. I'll have a lift in the house or something. That's when it'll cost that much. But somehow, apparently, Sydney is a little bit dearer to do. In Victoria, ballpark figure, anywhere between $1,350 to $1,500, including GST. You should be able to find a builder for that price very easy. $1,300 to $1,500 a square meter. I would say, to be on the safer side, I think you should go between $1,450 and $1,500 a square meter. I know at $1,500 a square meter you won't get caught out, but sorry, but if your end value, the end value of what you are developing, is $1 million or $950,000 plus, you should go with $1,600 or $1,650 a square meter, because a higher end townhouse or something would require you to have better finishes, better appliances, maybe not evaporated, but you'll have ducted heating and cooling and temperature control and all sorts of stuff. So a higher end stuff should be that. How much is the dollar per square meter for units? When you say units, you mean apartments, right? Apartments in Melbourne can range from anywhere between $2,500 a square meter, and they go to $4,500 a square meter, depending upon what you're trying to do. And that includes everything. There'll be a lift, there's an apartment, there'll be access for wheelchair, there'll be fire engineering reports required, there'll be a sprinkler system installed, all those things. So if you're building apartments, you should allow for, we allow for $1,300 a square meter for the basement. Actually, I might be able to pull something out and show you. We were recently doing some numbers that didn't work. I think I showed this to you last time. So over here, we were actually working off $1,300 for the basement, to dig the basement. And this wasn't a full apartment, so they were I mean, they look like apartments, but they are actually joined. Uh, it's like a hybrid of townhouse and an apartment. It requires all the stuff that the apartments require, but these ones didn't require any lift or anything. So we allowed for $1,700 a square meter, but the project didn't work. The end value didn't work on those. So yeah. Martin, could the price that you got yesterday, could that be for an apartment like a hybrid style townhouse? Because 2,200 for a townhouse actually looks a little bit dearer. I mean, if you go to Brisbane, you might be able to get it even cheaper. Um, I'm not sure. Craig would know. Craig, what's the square meter rate in Brisbane? 1450 to 1500. So that's pretty good. Yeah, Martin, I think you need to double check that because I think that figure is a little bit high. So Brisbane as well, I think the rate is 1450 to 1500 a square meter to build townhouses. So any other questions? Units are 2000 to 2500 in Brisbane as well. So which is I think which is correct. Any other questions from anybody? So, I'm not gonna see you or talk to you, or neither will you hear me next month because next month is a holiday. So, we actually get back together in January. So, I just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year to you and your family and everybody. And I hope that next year we're gonna kick some goals and we're gonna get into some projects. I'm actually planning a few different things for next year where people, it has to be 100% legit because I don't do anything shonky and not that kind of person, would never do. Um, uh, I'm talking to somebody, a securities company, who could put together information memorandums for us, and then I will be able to present projects to my students, to everyone who's in my database, to people who come to my seminar, and then I can legally do that and publicize it or tell people about it. And the entry point for most projects would be about 50,000 to about 100K to get into a project that we find, we stack, we deliver, and we execute, we do everything. And basically, whoever wants to come on board is more than welcome to come on board, and they can. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks very much, and Merry Christmas to you too. So anybody who wants to come in is more than welcome. Anybody who's got a family who wants to come on board, more than welcome. But it'll have all the rules, regulation, the risk, and everything because I've got to disclose everything. It'll be a full-on information memorandum put together by somebody who's got an AFSL license. And at the moment, I haven't got anything to present to you, but now I am working on different projects. The projects could be in Brisbane, the projects could be in Sydney, and the projects could be in Melbourne. So any of these three places, we will find, put together all of that. And we are looking for people who are trained, who can get trained onto the system of finding deals, stacking deals, and everything. Because if next year, hoping, because I'm working very hard, and every time I've figured that I've worked very hard, I've managed to achieve what I set out to achieve. So yeah, next year, if that works fine, then I would need eyes and ears and people on the ground who can find deals, stack deals, and execute projects. And if they execute the project, they find the project, we'll just look over their shoulder, making sure everything is going fine, and they can then get a fee for it. They can become part of the project. They can all sorts of things that we can do. So yeah, that's what's happening for next year. And if anyone's interested to learn more, shoot me an email. And next year, when we announce all of this, and there's a new website coming up for that, and when all of this is launched, I will let them know. And also, from next year onwards, this PDS. So far, I've been doing it on my own on the side. It'll all get combined with my two business partners, Sam and Igor. Very good people. They're just as good as me, but in different fields. Sam's got construction down pat, and Sam can really talk to site owners basically, and we're talking. There's a massive site with 25 vendors that we are talking to, and we've gone up to I think 16. We've still got a few to go through, and if everything goes fine, then we could have another big massive project. Yeah, it's and Igor's the project manager. He's very resourceful. If you want to find something cheaper somewhere else, a tile that's cheaper, or a chippy that's cheaper, or any kind of appliance, or anything to do with construction that's cheaper, faster, better, Igor's got it down pat. And what do? I look after the finance, legal, all the financial feasibilities, accounting, marketing. I look at all of these things, and I'll be running the seminars next year. But from next year onwards, anybody who signs up for mentoring or anything, even today, I mean, all my mentoring students know that they can come to my office anytime. I had one in the morning, this morning, who frequents my office every now and then, and that's totally fine. And from next year onwards, you won't have three mentors. You won't have one mentor. You'll have three mentors. Myself, there'll be Sam, who knows everything about construction, very knowledgeable. Igor, who knows where to source what from to get it cheaper, basically. So, and he basically makes sure that all the trades and everybody comes on the site properly, and they come when they're scheduled. And the construction management plan that needs to be endorsed, putting it together, getting it endorsed with the council, all those things Igor handles once the project is, we start building on it. So we have a site manager, his name's Rob, and hopefully in the seminar next year I might be able to introduce you to my entire team, and then from next year everything just becomes one, in one big umbrella. And this online course, as you know it, it'll still be available for you, but I will stop offering the online course from next year onwards. It'll only be a 3-day seminar. So whoever's already got the online course, they will get an option if they wanted to upgrade to come to the seminar, and they'll have a better pricing or discount to come to the seminar. So the first seminar, I think most probably would be in first week of June next year, because we need, there's something else that's happening in the front part of it. We need about 4 months of marketing and all that. So yeah, so next year I want to have 2 seminars for PDS, and there will be maybe 6 seminars, which will be the 1-day seminars that'll talk about the other website that's coming up. So yeah, I haven't told this to anybody. You guys are the first ones I've told this to. Yeah, it's we're working very hard day and night, find more projects, get more projects into the pipeline, because that's what we do, and that's what we want to continue doing, because yeah, I like the education side of it, I like the finance marketing side of it, so I continue doing that. And we were just trying to make sure, and the reason we've actually put everything together under one umbrella is because although I was doing this on my own by the side, it doesn't actually look good, because I do everything else with my business partners. So now everything just come into under one umbrella because we work as a team and we are very um, sensitive towards each other in the sense that nobody talks behind each other's back. Nobody's no one's boss. We don't want to work with people who we don't want to employ people, so to speak. Whoever comes on board with us comes as a partner in some capacity or form, and yeah. So we want to expand ourselves into Sydney and Brisbane as well. So if you're keen and if you are a goal getter and if you are an action taker and if you don't cry too much and yeah, you're more than welcome to learn more and get in touch with us and see what we can do together. Wish you Merry Christmas, everybody, again, and a very happy and a prosperous New Year. If you got anything that you wanted to talk to me about, shoot me an email. And Bob, I'm so sorry, I completely forgot about giving you a call back, and I will call you back. Don't get me wrong, but it won't be today. It will be tomorrow. So thanks very much, and I'll see you next year. So let's look at yield. In this, you don't really need to do anything. All you have to do is remember the blue cells. So over here, you just put in the year that you are in, and it changes everything for you. So if it's 2116, you just leave it at 2116, which is a period 0. That means that's the year you're doing the development. And then you've got capital growth rate that you put in, and you find out what is the capital growth rate in the area that you are developing. So let me explain what all this is. Everything else gets populated automatically, and I'll just go through what everything is. So this is basically telling your investors that this is your total development costs, which are 789, 580, and they will remain the same throughout the project. They will be exactly the same. So instant developers equity or profit upfront is about 180,419.09. So that's your profit, which gives you a development margin of 22.85%. Upfront equity slash cash contribution slash per unit is about, this is the upfront equity. So over here we calculated for the whole project. Over here, this is just saying that's what each unit holder has to chip in order to do a project like that. And then the return on equity per unit is again 172, because that won't change whether you're doing per unit or for the whole project. So then what is the capital growth going to be in that area if you were to develop this thing and hold a property that's had an average value of 970,000? So you put in so in this area, the capital growth rate is about 3.4% every year. And all I do is I put 3.4%, and it then escalates the value to show you what your equity would grow to in the next 5, 10, and 15 years. So your equity, which is basically you've made 180,000 here, and then that is your equity, and that will grow to 356 in 5 years, and 565 in 10 years, and 8112 in that year. So it doesn't include anything else but your profit and how it escalates. So your return on equity from the start is 172. In 5 years it'll be 340, so it's almost doubled. And then it doesn't quite double in the next 5 years, but after that it doubles again. So that's what you got to keep in mind to see the projection. Phase 4 is basically your rental. So let's say you were going to rent this out, and the rental calculations are done in another sheet, and I'll explain that, but let me just, so over here it's basically going by 5, 10, and 15 years. So it's calculating all the rent that you would accumulate in the next 5 years, and then 10 years, and then another 15 years, and so on. And that's the average rental yield per annum that you will start enjoying. And as the time goes by, your rental yield will improve because your capital injection or the upfront investment that you made was constant, and then the value of the property has gone up. So phase 4 is that what it would look like for you if you got your money out in phase 1 If you sold it now, if you sold it after 5 years, after 10 years and 15 years, what this doesn't take into account is that if you sell it after 5 years, there's no GST liability. But if you are going to hold it, then you can't claim the GST on it either. So for the sake of feasibility, it assumes that you will be selling everything and you'll be claiming everything under a margin scheme. So the things would change a little bit, but I thought this would be a good idea to include that to show you that your payout by the end of it would be, if you sell it after 5 years, you would have collected the development margin, the rental income, and the capital growth. So your 180,000 profit that you had made at the time would be in 5 years time would have more than doubled in terms of the rent that you would have collected, in terms of development margin, and in terms of the capital growth that you have enjoyed. So you need to make a decision of whether or not you are going to hold this for long term. Rental yield, it's fine. It's basically, again, all the years are over here, and I just wanted to see if I made a mistake or not, and I'll just quickly go here. No, I haven't. So that's fine. So once you change the year over here, the years get picked up. That's why it's not in yellow or anything, because you can't select these cells. So it automatically picks up your period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's say your rental increase per week or per annum as per CPI is 3%. Let's say your consumer price index is 3%, which is basically the amount of percentage rent that you can increase every year safely for the next years to come. And your rental per week is about 410, so you get a rental appraisal from your agent, put it in there. And these are outgoings as a percentage. There's no fixed thing. I just want to get a ballpark figure. So let's say my outgoings are my rates and my property management fees and my insurance, and that comes to about 10% of the rent that I'm making, so which is about 2,200, and this gives me the net rental income per annum, and this gives me the net rental yield, which is 2.87%. Now you will notice where the capital growth rate is a little bit higher, the rental yield will be lower, because these are $1 million townhouses. So if you rent the $1 million townhouses, your return that you will get would be lower. But if you rent something which is 450,000, for example, you could go as high as 4.7, 4.8% in rental yield, because it's just the value of the properties is lower, and so on. So all this is doing is giving you an average net rental yield throughout the 5-year period, and the rent that you will collect in the 5-year period. So that's your income that you will collect, and it goes on for the next 10 years and then another 15 years and so on. So what would the growth chart look like for you? So if you were a person who was just involved in property investment and you went to the market, don't worry about what this is. You can't select it. You can't change any of this. It just stays as it is. But you have to look at this graph, because this shows you that if you were an investor and you bought a property here, so you would be paying 789 plus 180, which is your GRV right here, 970. You would be paying that right here, and you would have missed out on this portion. And then you would have missed out on that. And I mean, after the 5-year period, the capital growth and all that, you would have enjoyed this, but you would have missed out on this portion right here. So what this tells you, that's how it will grow in the first instance, like in the year that you actually develop. So it's 0, 5, 10, and 15. I don't know why it shows 1, 2, 3, 4, but I will update that to show 0, 5, 10, and 15. It's actually picking up numbers from somewhere else, or I have missed out something. So I'll update that. So I just want you to get an understanding of in 5 years time, the value of your property would be the initial investment, the development margin, the rental income, and the capital growth. The good part about this is that the initial investment is what you borrowed from the bank, and you can reduce that by leaving your development margin in there. Keep paying the installments from your rental income and still enjoy the capital growth at the top. And that's how this would look like for the years to come. This is a project summary page. This is, you can put it together for your investors, and all you have to do is fill out some details. All these details get filled out automatically, and then you can print the whole sheet with all these pages, so that you can see, you can collate them together in a report and send it to people and get other people to look at it. So it automatically picks up all these details, fills it in for you. All you have to do is fill out the blue stuff, and this section here, you can fill out whatever you want to fill out in this section right here. And everything else is picked up. And the executive summary, where you could say the first stage would be I will acquire land, and then our second stage would be I will hire a consultant, and so on. Whatever you are doing for the development, that's what goes in there. And then this is a comparison, basically explaining explaining your investors that if they were to just buy retail, they will miss out on that extra bit of investment. They will have to make that extra bit of investment that they would have paid, that they would have generated themselves, the equity that they would have manufactured. So this shows them the instant developer's equity profit is all gone, and the variance would be 356. The return on equity would be gone. The growth rate would still be there, and their return on equity would fall to 42 instead of 85, and then 91 instead of 134, and so on. So all these things have to be taken into account of how they would do this. So yeah, and I've left the sheet here for you to do any calculations if you had to do. This sheet is all unprotected, so you can do whatever you want to do here. If you wanted to print this thing, you just press the print button, it comes up, and over here you select the entire workbook, and I'm just going to save it as a PDF. I go to desktop, call it test, and I'm just gonna put it there. So if I go to my desktop and I open the folder there, that's what my folder will look like. And then all the PDFs are here by page numbers, and all you do is open the project summary first, come back here, go to your thumbnails, and then you can import all the other sheets and just drag and drop, and you can actually combine them into one PDF, and just so that it's easier for your friends, whoever you send it to have everything in one PDF. And you can send it to them with, all you have to do is adjust the cover page so that the cover page is up front, because it actually gives a snapshot of the entire development. So I hope you make the best use of this SFC version 3.0. It is really good. That's what I use now most of the time. And all the very best. Guys, just a quick update. I think I did make a mistake, because the upfront equity or the cash contribution in the video that I was just explaining, or the sheet, was for the full project rather than just for per Tana. So I've actually now made it look like exactly what it was right here in the comparison sheet. So this mistake was just in the comparison sheet, and I've just updated that. So instead of 172 to 340, it's now 168. Instead of 539, it's 367. So that's all. There's no other change as such. So I wish you guys all the best.